Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pat's Creative Podcast, episode 19. Today, I am joined by a very special guest for more than one reason, not just because I've actually interviewed this guest many years ago, but also because he is a very inspiring creator. Naveed, would you care to introduce yourself to the people out there?
Yeah, I'm Naveed. I used to go by other names on YouTube and whatnot, but I just go by my name now, Naveed. I've made YouTube videos in the past. I've streamed. Been around the scene for a while now. I don't even know how long it's been. Like, feels like 10 years or something maybe. But yeah, I mean, that's me. I've just been around. I feel like I'm not a huge guy on YouTube or anything, but been around the block.
Well, even just uploading at any capacity for as long as you have provides a lot of experience that a lot of new people going into YouTube just won't have, because you've gotten to witness firsthand just how the platform has changed, how interests have changed, how people who want to make things suddenly they want to make different things, and how people watching suddenly want to see different things. You've got to witness it all firsthand, right?
Yeah, big time.
And I think that might be a good way to, well, I should also say, yes, veterans of the channel well, there's no veterans of the channel, but veterans of the channel may recognize that I've interviewed Naveed before, back then known as N-Freak, on a probably much less professional interview. I honestly don't remember yours being particularly, cringy or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Well, at the time, I haven't listened to it since then, but back then I thought it was pretty good, especially since I think I actually said I needed to do it separately. So you sent me questions and I recorded them separately.
Oh, that's right.
Or something like that. We didn't actually do it live back then.
Yeah.
You might have wanted to, but I may not have had the time for it.
No, I think I was encouraging people to not do it live because I had a much less recording friendly space, at least in audio wise. So I was like, man, I'm really nervous to try to risk bad background noise when talking to someone or whatnot. I eventually did start doing them live, but I basically took a break for a while. Now I'm back to it with a new focus of talking about creative stuff specifically. And I think maybe a great creative place to start is, because you already kind of mentioned it, you did actually rebrand from N-Freak since the last time I've talked to you. And I'm just curious, what was some of the reasoning behind that rebrand, and whether or not it's creatively benefited you to kind of go under your own name, or if it's more just you felt like N-Freak wasn't applicable anymore or whatnot.
Yeah, so I mean, this goes to show how long I've been on YouTube. Way back, my username used to be Nintendo Freak 888 because you gotta have a separate username from everybody else. But
sure.
So it started out as Nintendo Freak. At some point, I think I wanted to branch off from that because I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna do specifically only Nintendo content, even though that's still kind of what I focused on. So I changed it to just N-Freak, and I liked that for a while. But after a while, I was like, I kind of want to have things be more streamlined. Everything, like all my social media, all my YouTube, Twitch, whatever. I just wanted it all be the same and easy to remember. And I felt like my name was so unique.
Sure.
Pretty much nobody else uses the name Naveed, except for I think a Minecraft YouTuber right now, and he's pretty big.
It's tough competition.
It is
Those
big.
Minecraft YouTubers, man.
I know, crazy. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty unique, easy to remember, and that's why I thought I should probably just stick with that. It's less childish. Maybe it seems more professional. Having freak in the name is just a little bit weird.
Sure. Well, I asked Lorenzo de Sakura a similar question because and he was essentially saying that as a musician specifically, it almost gave a look of amateur if you use some name other than your own, right? Or but he also was mentioning that there's something that was more creatively inspiring to have his own name attached so much to his work as opposed to Zerachi. And I was curious if you've kind of felt anything like that, or does it not make much difference to you?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. Also, it's something that I forgot about, but now that I think about it, I actually joined another YouTube group at one point called Arcadia with a bunch of friends. And at that time, I remember talking with them about rebranding. Instead of being N-Freak, I used Nav, which is just NAV. like the first 3 letters of my name. And I still do that. I still use that kind of branding for like my intros and stuff like that, and when I title my videos. So that actually also pushed me a little bit more after we kind of like separated back into our own thing, to rebrand my own channel back into just my name, so I can use Nav for that as well. But yeah, I mean, creatively, like using my name, I do think like having my name attached to something was something I was also like thinking about as well.
Right.
And some people, like a lot of people, weirdly enough, would always come and ask me like, what does the N stand for in N Freak?
Right.
And they would thought it was like, is it your name? Is it Naveed Freak? And I'm like, that'd be weird, right? Like, why would I be a freak of myself?
That's true.
For myself. I don't know.
Maybe you're just a really big fan of yourself, you know?
I am. I mean, I think it should be, but I was not a Naveed freak. So, I mean, it was a little bit confusing as well.
At the very least, it transitioned kind of nicely, though, because keeping that N in there almost keeps some sense of your identity from before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think it's interesting you brought up Arcadia, because I also had a question that kind of pertained to that. But was your experience with Arcadia, like, what were some of the pluses about working with another group of people on like a specific channel, and then what were some of the struggles you may have run into that you don't run into when you're working on your own channel? Just overall, what's your general experience with that?
I mean, the great thing about that was that we were all just friends, you know, working together,
right.
And we were basically doing our own thing. Obviously, we'd get together and we'd have like calls and stuff talking about what we're going to do moving forward. But the thing is, I wasn't really part of that group for very long. I mean, it was actually only a few months. I got to do some great things in terms of like going to some cons as a guest, having some panels, which was really, really cool. It was a great experience. But overall, you know, it was creatively, you had all the freedom, you could do whatever you want. And like I said, we were just hanging out with friends and kind of like shooting I don't know if I can curse on this. I never asked about that, but yeah. But we were just shooting all the time, and yeah, I mean, it was a good experience for sure.
Was there any difficulties with having to work with other people, or did you find because you had that freedom, it essentially just allowed you to do exactly what you wanted, basically?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what it was. Like you could make whatever videos you wanted. We would discuss it together though. Like, I mean, we'd be like, hey, do you think this is a good idea? So we'd be able to bounce ideas around from each other, which was cool. And that was the nice part of being in a group. Another nice part was that you didn't have to, I'm bad at this anyway, but you didn't have to focus on making content consistently. Like,
right.
Cause you had other people to help out as well. Cause that helped out with the, scheduling, but that was also part of the issue because so many people got busy and it felt like at some points it was on specific people to make videos at certain times. But,
right.
It was nice not to have to worry about making something like every week or something like that.
Sure. And did you guys have any like group collaborations with regards to videos, or was panels kind of the furthest you got to creating something together?
For me, it was only panels. I've done like collaborations like before, and we had a podcast at some point as well, an Arcadia podcast that I don't remember how many episodes there were, but it wasn't too many. So that was kind of the place, the podcast, where we would get together and kind of talk amongst one another a lot. And but I don't recall there being too many actual collabs within each other's videos.
And if we go back a little bit past that too, I mean a lot past that. When you first started making YouTube videos, would you say that you were specifically trying to scratch a creative itch, or did you kind of see other channels doing certain things and you thought, I can kind of do that also? Were you inspired by maybe other friends in the industry? Like, how did you kind of get about to uploading YouTube?
It was definitely the second point. I would get on YouTube, see, like, back then gaming content was not super prevalent because I started, like I said, years ago in like 2008, 2009, something like that. And back then, YouTube wasn't super saturated with all this gaming stuff. So I would see like one or two YouTubers just filming their television, like with a camera, doing videos like reviews or anything like that. And I'm like, yeah, we could totally do that. So I decided I wanted to do that in high school. I had a neighbor who lived just a couple doors down from me. So he would come over. We did like videos together. He went by Twisted Foo online. And
it's always interesting seeing how these names just evolve, you know.
I know.
They usually start off by one moment where you're like, I just need an in-game name. That's all I need. But then it turns into something much bigger.
Yep, totally. But yeah, like we would do just that. We would take a camera, set it up on a tripod, record the freaking TV screen. Mm-hmm. And we started out originally like really terrible quality, just awful.
Sure.
It was shot off like a small 12 to 13 inch CRT. You could see the black lines because of the refresh rate or whatever, like coming up on those CRTs, and oof, it was so bad. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was definitely something we did for fun. And that's the part of YouTube and Twitch that you kind of forget about.
Right.
At some point, I think a lot of people go into it with other intentions, but I always started out, it was something we did for fun, and I think that's the mindset I have now as well.
I mean, I think, you know, the formalities of filming a CRT television or even just having like, you know, not having the gear for editing or, you know, terrible lighting and stuff like that. Like those are all just formal elements that are supposed to aid that original conception anyway, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're just genuinely having fun making those videos, I think the formalities start to matter a lot less anyway. So I think there's something kind of pure about that, you know, because I remember a lot of those videos too of just so many TV sets appearing on YouTube. Yep. And, you know, it's, when it comes down to it, it's just a lot of people who had a passion that they wanted to share and just use whatever materials was around them, right? And I guess to kind of rewind even further then, did you have any urge to, like, would you have considered yourself an artist before all this YouTube stuff? Or do you think that was kind of your introduction into the creative journey?
It was probably my introduction, because even now I don't really consider myself much of an artistic person. I was never great at drawing, couldn't sing really. Music wise, I took some classes for some things, but I was never very good at it. So I mean, that became my creative outlet.
Right.
Once I started doing videos, and then learning about video editing as I went along was pretty fun. Like you'd learn about all these different effects and techniques you could use. And
right.
I'm still not a great video editor by any means, but it was really cool to just kind of grow up and learn that stuff on my own.
Sure. Well, and it's a fascinating medium because it's hard to find mediums that can combine that many genres into one piece, mm-hmm. like both audio, video, but then this sense of like post-production that's being added to it. All with like immediate gratification of just rewinding 30 seconds and playing it back, right? Yep. It's such a bizarre art form that I feel like it's tough to get those to scratch the same itch with other ones. And I think that's what's kind of neat about editing.
Yep.
And just video making in general. And if you weren't making video essays, do you think you would have an urge to create something else now that you've done that? Like, because you've definitely gone on breaks before too, right? Do you find yourself just really itching to get back to creating something?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I always have ideas for things. But I'm just very bad at doing it. Right. You know, like if I wasn't making like videos, I'm not sure if I'd really be doing much else creatively. I can't think of anything else that I would like really want to do.
But you definitely feel the urge for video making specifically.
Yeah, it always comes up. It always comes back. Like I'll take a break for a year, like maybe even more than a year at some point, and then I'll just get this itch. I'll be like, yeah, this is an idea I have. I really, really want to do it.
Sure.
So I'll get into it. And then there's always roadblocks along the way.
Sure.
With any project. I mean, anybody's going to have that, but you know, I always want to make something. I have a list, like I always keep a list of ideas as well, so I can always reference that.
Right.
Just in case. So.
And what kind of roadblocks do you typically run into? Like, do you run into more creative roadblocks or just like formal elements, like not having enough time or not having the space or something like that. Would you say it's more formal roadblocks or more mental creative roadblocks that you hit?
For me, it's mostly writing. So I would say mental. The great thing about, going back to like early YouTube for me was we could just set up the tripod, record the TV screen or whatever we did, and just talk, And a lot of people still do that. It was sort of like a Let's Play style video I used to do, but it wasn't really a Let's Play.
Sure.
But now I'm doing more, scripted content, and writing was not always my forte. So actually getting my thoughts into words has always been the issue for me when trying to come up with these videos. So I would say the mental aspect of that is the part that gets to me. But it's like, it's so weird because like one day I'll just sit down and then I've had like a paragraph written over a month. And then one day I'll just sit down and then write the entire thing in one night.
Suddenly you got a novel.
Yeah. What
it's
happened?
So bizarre how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it is.
Would you say that that feels more like your art form then is in the writing process specifically? Like, do you find the conception of the idea almost the most important part to your creative drive? Or would you say only when it all comes together do you really see it as like a piece essentially?
I think it's a little bit of both because once you see everything come together, that's when you really, really feel like you've made something.
Sure.
Sometimes it doesn't even happen until you like maybe add music to a video, something like that. I've gone into creating so many videos where I just think it's not great.
Right.
Like I have everything edited, all the footage, all my voiceover, everything sounds fine, but I just don't think it's great. And then I add music to it, and the music just makes it pop.
Right.
Other times it's just like, adding the footage on top. So it's a little bit of everything. I think the writing is definitely a big part of it though, because once you see everything and go through everything, start recording audio for it, you can kind of tell that it's flowing really well.
Well, because I asked Chris kind of a similar question, and he was saying that essentially once the idea is outside of his head, he almost doesn't want to touch it anymore, right? Mm-hmm. He will edit it because he has to as a means of getting the idea out there, but he sees this idea or this script that he makes as that's the actual art. Everything else is just a vehicle of getting it out there, right? And he said he doesn't even like to watch his videos because of that, because he wants to move on to like the next idea. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just curious, like while the scripting might be the toughest part to kind of get started for you, is there any other aspect of video making that you feel that you almost value more than scripting in a way, or coming up with that idea?
That's the biggest part for me, the scripting, for sure. Because after that's done, I can knock out a video within a week.
Right.
I can get everything done really quickly. Like I've tried to stray away a lot from like super highly edited videos as well. So even the editing process itself has kind of taken a back seat in terms of the creative aspect of it. Like I'll add some things here and there, but I try to make the words be mostly what I'm talking about in a video, and kind of the footage speaks for itself,
Sure. Well, and to kind of touch on when you're mentioning like just trying to phrase yourself correctly when writing or whatnot, do you think that you ultimately articulate yourself better through writing as opposed to maybe more free form discussion like this? Like, do you find yourself more effective when you're behind a script, basically?
Absolutely, yeah. If I tried to go into a video and doing like a free form style thing where I just talk off the top of my head, it would be a jumbled mess.
Right.
Totally. There'd be no way I could like correctly articulate my thoughts on something without actually writing a script. And I always have to go back and like watch footage that I recorded or something like that and be like, oh yeah, I remember this part. I got to talk about this. And sometimes I'll take notes about that, like which part of the footage that's in. So yeah, it'd be very, very tough for me to like actually do something free form. Well, and especially without the help of like another person there, like I used to do. So
yeah, and that kind of brings up an interesting point. Do you miss the days of being able to bounce back ideas to other people like in your video creating process, or do you think ultimately it's just smoother when you're at the steering wheel.
Yeah, sometimes I miss it. I mean, there was a time when I would also like send scripts out to friends, and they'd kind of go through it and give me feedback here and there. That was very nice as well. That gave me a lot of good constructive criticism going back and editing scripts. But it is smoother kind of for me, just working for myself, and then I go back and I know my process. I know where I need to change things. So I'll definitely like make my own edits here and there, but I do miss being able to work with others.
Sure.
But there's pros and cons to both things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and with writing versus performing, right? There's always like creators tend to always fall on one side or the other with regards to what they can articulate themselves better with.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time I've just found that I can better articulate myself in a free form scenario like this, just because similar with you, whenever I write anything for like a video essay or any kind of article or something like that, I always get lost in the specifics at which my words take place, and I'm constantly re-editing, taking things out and putting stuff back in, to the point where I was like, well, I feel like I've got a handle on this free form well enough to where I can actually articulate myself better through it than with video essays, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, there's creators who are entirely on the other side. Lee, for an example, he in his videos, he uses the perfect words to explain so many things. Like, he can articulate himself great in his essays. But then he said when he comes to freeform, it takes him a little bit longer to get those ideas out there.
Yeah.
And that's just something that's always fascinated me, because people really do articulate themselves differently.
It totally depends on the content, I think. If I completely change the way I did my videos, I might be able to do something like that. But the way I do things now, where I have to research a bunch of stuff, and then like actually like do some digging in on a game or whatever I'm talking about,
right?
I feel like I definitely have to have this structure in front of me when I do the videos.
And do you think explaining and analyzing a piece of art such as games or whatnot, do you think that's the most important part of your work, is showcasing a deeper look at something like that? Or would you say it's more something else with regards to maybe raising appreciation levels or letting people know about games that don't exist? Because obviously you have a whole series about that, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important part of your creating?
Yeah, the thing I've been focusing on recently has definitely been more of like, I want to showcase things that are more obscure, people don't know about a lot.
Right.
I've been getting like very much into like import stuff, so games that came out like in Japan only or Europe only, and really like showcasing that stuff for people in the US, because obviously we never got to experience that. And then I also do really, really like talking about the history of games as well. I did a video on Aonuma a few years ago, where I took a look back and, where he started, how he like got into games, and then talked about like the main focus of the video was on a specific game, but I did look back at the history of that stuff as well. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of my video making. But
well, then a kind of an additional question to add on top of that is, if you had to kind of take that most important part of video making for you and do it in another form, something that maybe isn't a video essay or might not even be video related at all, right? What kind of approach do you think you would take?
I mean, so one thing I've been doing recently is streaming, and I've been streaming. An idea I had was I would be streaming like Nintendo's old E3 press conferences.
Right.
So that was an awesome way to look back at some of the history of Nintendo and kind of talk about it while looking at, older announcements and stuff like that. And so what we'll do is just we'll check out something, and then they'll show a game. Maybe it was something that actually got canceled or something. So I'll pause the video and I'll talk about it with the chat. So that's kind of like another way I've been using that.
For sure.
But yeah.
And do you think that interactivity between chat kind of helps that focus specifically of raising appreciation level for different games? Like, does having a chat to bounce that off of almost improve the gratification levels, or?
I think so, because they'll also talk about things that I don't remember or I don't know about in any capacity.
Sure.
And I'll be like, oh wow, that's really cool. That's interesting. Right. So having that chat, that is the place where, like, obviously it's live, so you're gonna have to be free form. So that is the kind of like place where I think the free form style suits me much better. Obviously it does for everybody, but it's very nice to be able to like actually talk with people about this stuff and show them what was happening back then. Like you go back to like E3 2008 and you get to see Nintendo showing off Wii Music again as if it's like some sort of huge game. And I get it might have been for them, but just looking back at that stuff is so much fun.
Who doesn't want to relive that?
I know, Ravi drums, dude.
Yeah. Definitely a different place for Nintendo back then than it is now.
It was, yeah. They were much more focused on casual gaming and, mainstream audiences and all that. But I think they flipped the switch pretty quickly after that.
They did. A lot of RPGs now, which is kind of the opposite of casual, right?
I know, yeah.
So to kind of just change gears a little bit, basically to go back to when you were starting out or whatnot, you mentioned that you saw other channels doing certain things and you wanted to kind of build from that. Mm-hmm. Do you have any kind of like inspirational channels that you may have drew inspirations from specific elements of their work? Like maybe you saw someone who scripted things nicely and you wanted to kind of incorporate something similar in your own, or maybe even just in their ideas, you thought you wanted to present them the same way someone else is presenting. Like, where do you draw some of your inspirations from?
Yeah, I think the biggest inspiration for me in terms of kind of more of my modern style of videos was definitely Waleed or Balrog, the Master. I think he only goes by Balrog now, but he went by Balrog the Master in the past.
Sure.
And I thought when I was making videos back then, like 2010, 2011, he was doing a lot of Nintendo stuff, and his format was really grabbed me back then. So I took inspiration a lot from him. And then just after that, weirdly enough, he created Hidden Block with a bunch of other creators as well. And once I got into the forums, there was a bunch of people in there who I am still friends with now who inspired me to do different things. And I think that's the point where I really was like, okay, I need to like elevate my video making process. Like I was still, even in like 2013, I was still kind of doing off-screen recordings and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I need to kind of make my stuff better, because a lot of these people were getting into the game and I was seeing that stuff and they inspired me to do better.
Sure. Well, and I remember even back when I interviewed you last, the quality in your videos was definitely noticeable. And because you had relatively good lighting, relatively good camera and whatnot. Is that something you were already equipped with when you decided to kind of change to higher quality, or did you make those kind of investments? Did you have any like life hacks or anything like that? Or
I definitely had to make some investments. Like I got to get a capture card at some point. Then my first capture card was a Roxio game capture or something. I don't know.
Okay.
And
I
then
haven't even heard of that.
Yeah, I don't even know if they exist anymore. But it was like one of the few HD ones back then. And then I had to buy like a better camcorder I had at the time. Got that off Craigslist way back then. So I mean, life hack, check Craigslist. They got some good deals on there. But yeah, no, I definitely had to make some investments, and then those investments got even greater over time. Would get new capture cards, new cameras, and that actually that led to other things. I guess now that I think about it, going back to other artistic outlets, buying these new cameras actually got me more into photography as well, which that's a hobby that I enjoy now.
Well, yeah, I'd love to talk about that more. So
sure, yeah.
How did you kind of get involved in that? You just I didn't even know this is a creative hobby that you did, and I love asking about other creative hobbies. So what kind of photos do you like to take? How did you get into it? Like, talk to me. What is this?
So like obviously like when I'm looking into video equipment, all that stuff,
right?
Looking at videos, DSLRs was the thing people were getting into
Sure.
a lot. Obviously, they were back in the day. DSLRs didn't really do video too much, but things
Right.
started to pick up, and those types of cameras, they got into more video focused things. So I looked into some. I got a Nikon. Don't even remember the model name, but I got a Nikon camera for video recording specifically, and then
Sure.
I delved way deeper. I fell down the rabbit hole of like cameras and lenses and all that
Right.
stuff. So I got a few lenses for that camera, and I would take it on trips because my family's from Iran. We'd go to Iran sometimes. So I got into like photography while I was there.
Right.
And even now, I like to go on walks, take photography, or take pictures of like wildlife. I don't do
Sure.
it as often as I'd like, but it's just something
Right.
that I've really enjoyed over time after, kind of learning a lot more about cameras and what they can do.
Yeah. Well, and do you think there's something specifically about that medium that might attract you that you don't get in others? Like, I took a photography class, and it felt like one of those art forms was like, if I wasn't doing all this other stuff, I feel like I would choose this one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think a big reason for that for me was just this idea of entirely being able to capture a moment in time so permanently, in a sense, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of what drew me to it. I'm curious if you had something else that really, really makes you like photography over other art forms.
That's very much the same for me. Like just having that moment, you don't have to be perfect.
Sure.
Obviously, when you're taking photography, so much of photography is still editing.
Right.
Go into a program like Lightroom or whatever,
Yeah.
edit your photos. Like pretty much every photo nowadays is edited crazily.
Sure.
But just getting that moment and
Right.
being able to capture a single moment, even when you're looking at it on your camera, you're like, damn, that's cool. I was
Yeah.
able to get that. Like video is cool. There's motion and everything. And I do that as well in other
Sure.
other hobbies like video making. But getting that one specific moment, if you're like one picture I took at some point was just a bird flying above
Yeah.
water or something like that,
Right.
Once you snap your first bird just like flying, you're like, damn, that's cool. How did I do that?
Right. I think something I very much enjoyed was also being able to make something so beautiful out of even the ugliest of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be litter on the road, you could get the framing right and have good composition to have it actually be something that you enjoy looking at later. And I'm curious, do you take any photographs based on, would you say when you take photographs, it's more based on the content or the formality of the pictures, basically?
One thing I actually did, I think it was like 2 years ago now. I should do it again because it was really fun. But I asked Twitter. I went on Twitter. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go outside and take some pictures. Just give me a word
Right.
or two, and I will try to take a picture based on that word."
Okay.
And so I forget, like somebody said like seagull, and I found
Sure.
a picture of a seagull on a U-Haul truck.
Oh, okay.
So I tried to like create something actually artistic out of that. It's a U-Haul truck, so it's not exactly a nice thing
It's
to
also
look at, but
a graphic that's already printed on a different two-dimensional surface, so you have to
Right.
find some way to make that interesting.
yeah. So I mean, that sort of thing is really fun to me, and that's kind of what I
Yeah.
try to do with photography. Is I find whatever I can and kind of try to make it look better than it actually is. I took a photo of a damn cigarette butt somewhere that I thought looked really cool.
Sure.
So
I mean, I don't want to get too much into my photography experience, but I very much enjoyed a photo walk that I took with a tripod. And this was for my class. I was still learning some things, and I thought I'll bring a tripod in case I need it. I found that I never wanted to use the tripod because I just wanted to, control it with my hands. So
Yeah.
I kind of looked like a fool, kept hauling over this tripod, never using it. And I decided to kind of make a narrative out of it where I would take pictures of the tripod in bizarre areas.
That's
and,
cool.
Turned it into a photo book and wrote down like, where is my camera and stuff like that. Just a silly little children's photo book in a way.
I really like that idea. That's really
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah, no, I very much enjoyed it. And I'm always sad because we only have so much time on this earth, right? And there's so many other art fields that I'm interested in. I just happen to choose like video making and podcasting as kind of my main form, but
Mm-hmm.
had something else, had someone rolled a 3 instead of a 4 at some point, I might have been down the photography lane, right?
Yeah.
But I have another question about photography though.
Sure.
Do you fall under the camp of manual or auto?
Oh, well, it depends on the situation, I think. But like, okay. Also, are you talking about like manual focus, manual like controls in terms of the ISO and?
Let's say, what extent of manual do you go?
Sometimes I'll go full on manual. I have some lenses that are manual focus only and manual aperture only. So I'll use that sometimes. Sometimes I go auto for like the wildlife type photography. When you're trying to capture like faster moving objects, I think having that automatic like focus and whatever is super, super helpful. But I usually using like all the like settings, ISO, all that stuff. Usually I stick with manual for all that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's not even so much that you'll always get a better picture because of it, but there's something that feels so good about like twisting everything, having that control. Like something feels like it feels almost more of a craft in a way.
Totally.
Even when sometimes the auto will look a lot better, right? And you'll end up taking so many more photos with manual because you're trying so many different like exposures and stuff like that.
You'll get a super overexposed shot one time and then underexposed another time, but then it feels so good to just pinpoint that right exposure. It does.
Especially when you see them lined up in Lightroom and you're just looking at like, oh, this one's clearly the winner. Like there's something satisfying about that.
100%.
But and then another camp question I want to ask is, well, and this is less so of camp, but I'm just curious, have you delved at all into film photography, or have you mostly stuck with digital, basically?
It's been mostly digital for me. I have not really done anything with film. I'd love to try. That'd be very, very fun, but I have not gotten into it.
I've never gotten into it, but it's definitely something that because you and I both like manual, I think we'd both enjoy some of the aspects of putting the film in the liquids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Messing with it. Totally. Anyway, I don't mean to stay on photography forever.
Hey.
I obviously just love it. So
that was something that I completely forgot about, weirdly enough. Like I love photography too, but just not in my headspace at the time we're talking about this. I've been so focused on like the video stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, photography is something I'm really into as well.
Well, that's just one of my favorite things about this podcast is that us artists, we don't stick to one form. We always have something else that we're interested in, and just hearing interesting conversations about people who also compose their own music or write their own novels or write poems, and sometimes there was someone like animating and motion effects. You get to hear such specific art forms and open more perspectives on that, and that always excites me. Especially photography, because I actually got interested in that one. Still have yet to talk to someone who used to be a barista. You've never been a barista, right?
Nope. No,
okay.
I have not.
Still waiting until I can connect with someone on espresso making. But, anyway, I'll kind of move on to another topic. This is kind of a question that I like to ask most of the guests, and that's just if you had any piece of advice that you could give yourself when you started out creating, what piece of advice would that be? Or if you'd rather just something you've learned in the process that you would like more creators to know going in, basically.
Well, I kind of touched on it earlier. I think I got into it. I got into the creative like video making process because it was fun. And I think if someone's trying to get into it now, just go into it and do your own thing and have fun with it. I wouldn't expect, I wouldn't try to go into it expecting to like make a living out of it. It's possible. It's something that's possible for sure. But I don't think that's the right mindset to have going into something like this. It's very difficult. It's going to take a lot of work if you do want to do that, but just going into it as a hobby, having fun, doing your own thing. That's the advice I would give somebody. And back, if I was giving myself advice back in the day, since I was already kind of going into for the fun aspect of it, I would say try, like, even if you're doing your own thing, maybe try a little bit to make it a little more professional, a little less, just thrown together. But even if you've just got a camera even if you just want to record off a screen and that's all you've got and you want to do this stuff, I would say do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always, whenever I face levels of like burnout or just I feel like something's wrong in my content, one thing I always go back to is just finding the most important element of making something and then revolving everything else just around that, right? Because it can be easy to see this guy filmed his screen with the camera, so I'm going to do that too, and then I'm talking about games. But if you break it down to what you actually really want to talk about and what that purpose is, you know, you can kind of let your video build on itself from that, and it might not always be the same product you originally envisioned.
Yep.
And if you're just going into YouTube now, I don't know, would you say it was almost easier back then when you started to go into YouTube with that kind of mindset, while now we're almost a little bit more programmed to think about the numbers and the possibilities? Or
yeah, 100%. When I first started making money on YouTube, I don't even think it was a thing.
Sure.
So it wasn't even a thought in the back of my mind. You could only make videos that were like 9 minutes long. If I wanted to make anything longer than that, it would be in 2 parts. So back then it was much easier. And I kind of like, my thought process on YouTube evolved over time. So I started out with this like mindset of just, you know, have fun with it. And then the monetization came in later and I learned about all that stuff. And I was like, wait a second, maybe I could try to do this as a living. And I think that part of it was not good for me personally.
Sure.
And then over time, again, it switched again back into, no, this is just a hobby. This is just for fun. Right. So I've kind of gone through the ringer in terms of that. Like I've gone through all that change in mindset. So it was much, much easier to go into it back in the day without that sort of thing. You see so many people now. You see like, you know, Mr. Beast, PewDiePie, whatever. Yeah. All those big creators making so much money. And you're like, wow, I want to do that. I mean, even like Scott the Woz. And I can understand why it would be appealing to someone to want to get into this,
make a living off video games. Yeah. I mean, if you're offering, I'll take it.
If I could, I totally would. Like, but you know, it's just not something I would expect going into it now.
Yeah. And it's very bizarre because if you look up videos on YouTube about what you should know about YouTube and different like helpful videos, if you're genuinely trying to learn, you are going to be fed a lot more videos that are number oriented too.
True. The
amount of times someone sends me a video saying something like, this is how you increase your audience, this is how you make more appealing thumbnails and stuff like that.
The algorithm changing.
The algorithm, right, exactly. And people pinpointing specific things. You know, I get that they don't mean any harm by it, but it's very clear that level of success is very different from my idea of success, because what's really big for me is just being creatively healthy. And I think I'm lucky right now to have a format where that works for me, where I can be just creatively healthy. But I think people coming in, they don't worry about that part as much. They don't worry about the fact that they might hate their content as they make it later, right?
Yeah.
The longevity between making something because you're passionate about it and making something because it's appealing to an audience, it's much smaller for appealing an audience. You know, you're going to hit some kind of level of burnout at some point.
Yep.
And I think that's why it's just important to constantly remind people about that. And that just seems to be a common trend too, when people bring up advice they would give themselves. But anyway, I'll kind of move on to another question. We're actually getting close to wrapping up. So this is usually a wrapping up question that I like to offer. And that's just, of course, how you've been creatively impacted by everything going on in 2020. I don't mean to pry into anything personal, right? But if, you know, I'm mostly curious about how maybe your creative drive has changed, if you felt more inspired, less inspired, if you've been consuming less art or consuming more art or something, you know, how has this been impacted by 2020?
I think originally, when everything first started, like stay-at-home orders and all that first started, I was like, okay, I might have some more time to actually do this stuff. Because I mean,
sure,
I have a full-time job now, and going into the office, coming back home every day, I would get really burnt out and tired. So after that, I wouldn't want to do anything. But now that I'm at home for a lot of the day, I'm still doing work, but it just felt more like I had I had time to myself to be able to do other things.
Sure.
And I kind of got back into the creative process with videos. I'm still not great at uploading consistently. I'm still very bad at that. But,
Sure.
you know, I had ideas, I executed them, and then I also got back into like Twitch streaming, which I had not done for at least a year or two again. So it gave me more time, I think. And I know, I think this question is really, really interesting because I know everybody's going to have a different answer. I know like
everybody has so far.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people would be like, yeah, no, it's been terrible. But for me, I think it's been actually a pretty good thing.
Right. Yeah. Cause like, some people have mentioned like that they almost creatively shut down for a while. Right. Because even though they had all this time, they just felt like how am I supposed to perform right now? Right.
There's so much going on in the world. There's like, I can't focus on this thing. I get that aspect of it too. But.
And another big thing is just because people have had this free time, they've almost had almost like an idea of there's suddenly other things in my life that I need to put this time towards, right? Whether that be talking again with friends and family and recommunicating with them and whatnot. Some people have had to shift their priorities because they now have the free time to do other things.
True.
And I always just find it interesting in how we all operate so differently, right? And with regards to like consuming more art or whatnot, if you felt that you've needed more escapism with everything going on, if you found it difficult to even make time for that, or how has that kind of been affected?
I don't think that's been affected for me too much. I feel like, I mean, I've been watching less, like fewer movies and stuff like that, but that's mostly as a result of not being able to go into like theaters or anything. Right. But in terms of like other forms of media, I feel like I've been mostly the same, like playing games the same, listening to music. But yeah, that aspect has not been affected too much for me personally.
Sure. Well, and it looks like you've been creating at a relatively decent pace lately, and it seems like you're in a good spot creatively. So I hope that all continues.
I hope I can keep it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very bizarre saying this question now that we're in 2021, but also, isn't it still kind of 2020, right? Like
yeah, it totally
still feels
is.
like it's not quite over yet. So I still feel like it's at least relatively relevant.
We're like getting we're getting up to a place where it's more comfortable, but then at the same time, I'm still like, nah.
It's just a long transition. That's what it is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. But you know, I'm glad to see that in some ways it helped your creative drive, and I hope that continues throughout 2021. And we are actually going to start wrapping things up here, as much as I hate to say it. Naveed, it's been absolutely great having you on. Would you care to explain to everybody where they might be able to find you, what kind of projects you're working on or whatnot, anything of the sorts?
Sure. Yeah, this was a blast. I loved being on here. I am on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, social medias like Instagram, I guess. Everything is just my name, though. Naveed Mohebbi. That's where you can find me. Pretty easy, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I've been working on streaming a lot lately, and I've got a couple video ideas in the back burner, but haven't really started on them yet. But we'll see where they go. Hopefully I can get them rolling.
Sure. And then where are we gonna be able to see all of your awesome photographs? Just asking for a friend.
I do have a Flickr. I don't actually know if I can send that to you if you would like, but I don't
If
actually...
you send me a Flickr, by golly, I'll share it for sure.
Yeah, I'll send you that. I don't actually know if I have like a username or anything. It might just be my name again, but yeah, I do have a Flickr.
There you go. You might be able to see some more photographs from Naveed. And of course, if you guys would like to see anything that we mentioned earlier in a more condensed form, these are uploaded as highlights on my channel. And if you're here watching on Patreon, thank you so much for the support. And I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate Naveed being here. And
I hope you
guys all have a wonderful day. And yes, thank you for joining yet again. Here's to 5 years down the line when we do this again, right?
I can't wait. I can't wait.
5-year
forward
tradition.
To it.
All right, we'll see you on the next podcast. So long, guys.
See ya.